At my graduation dinner, everyone was laughing, until Grandma smiled and said, "I'm so glad the $1,500 I send you each month has been helping." When I said I never got any money, the table went silent and everyone slowly turned to look at my parents. My grandmother said it the way she said most things that mattered, warmly, without ceremony, leaning forward in the candlelight like she was sharing something sweet. "I'm just so glad the $1,500 I send you every month has been helping, dear." The restaurant noise didn't stop all at once. It faded, the way sound fades when your brain has decided that one specific thing in your immediate environment requires every available resource and has started quietly redirecting them. The table next to us kept laughing about something. The server somewhere behind me was listing the dessert specials. A glass clinked. My brother Ben's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. My father's champagne flute, raised in the motion of someone about to drink, never reached his lips. My mother looked at the centerpiece. I looked at my grandmother. Eleanor Carter is 78 years old and has never, in my entire life, said anything she didn't mean. She leaned toward me with her reading glasses pushed up into her silver hair and her eyes warm with the specific pride of a woman who has been watching a person she loves accomplish something difficult and has been quietly, privately glad to have helped. She had no idea what she had just placed on the table. "Grandma," I said. My voice came out even. "I don't know how. I never got that money." One beat of absolute silence. Then my father said, "Ruby, I never got it." I said again, still even. Still looking at my grandmother, whose face had done something I had never seen it do, moved through warmth and confusion and the specific expression of a person who is beginning to understand that they have walked into a room they didn't know existed. "What do you mean you never got it?" she said. I meant exactly what I said. I had worked 2 jobs through 4 years of college, and I had never once received a single dollar of the $1,500 per month my grandmother had been sending every month for my education. I knew where it had gone. I had a binder in my bag that documented exactly where it had gone, in 4 colors, with timestamps and account numbers and receipts. But that was for later. Right now, there was just the table and the candlelight and my grandmother's face and my parents, who had gone the specific quality of silent that only belongs to people who have been caught. My name is Ruby Carter. I am 22 years old, and I graduated on a Tuesday with a degree in economics from the University of Illinois with a 3.7 GPA, which I am going to tell you how I accomplished, because accomplishment requires context, and this story is nothing without its context. I grew up in a 4-bedroom house in Naperville, Illinois, in a family that had enough. Not extravagantly. My father, Mark, is a regional sales manager for a medical equipment distributor, a steady income, a solid middle-class salary. My mother, Sarah, teaches part-time at a community college and manages the household finances with what I grew up understanding as care and precision, which I now understand differently. My brother Ben is 25 and has always been the kind of son whose needs were attended to, with the specific urgency of a parent who has decided that a child's comfort is a reflection of their own competence. I am the other kind. The philosophy in our house when I was growing up was struggle makes you stronger. My father said it first, and he said it often, and he said it with the genuine conviction of a man who believes something because it is convenient to believe it, who has, somewhere between the idea and the application, confused other people's struggle with principled parenting. When I was 16 and asked for money for a homecoming dress, my father said struggle makes you stronger and suggested I babysit for it. I babysat. I went to homecoming in a dress from the Goodwill on Route 59 that I altered myself with YouTube tutorials and a sewing kit I bought at Walgreens. My mother's version was softer. She called it building character. She said disappointment is a tool. She said these things with the warmth of someone who genuinely believes they are offering wisdom. And for a long time, longer than I want to admit, I believed she was. It sounded like parenting. It was actually a cover story. When I got into the University of Illinois, the conversation about finances happened once, briefly, at the kitchen table, with both my parents and a printed copy of the financial aid package. My father said the aid was good, that my part-time work would cover what remained, and that he and my mother would contribute what they could when they could. My mother said she was proud of me. Ben, who was a junior in high school at the time and was not present for the conversation, would later have his college application fees covered, his apartment deposit covered, his car, a used Toyota Camry in good condition, covered, and a ski trip to Colorado in his freshman year of college covered. I didn't know that then. I know it now. I know it in the color-coded, time-stamped, 3-copy printed in a black binder way that I know everything I'm going to tell you. I took a job at the university library in my first week of freshman year. Night shifts, primarily. The library was open until midnight on weekdays, and I worked 4 evenings, shelving books, helping students at the reference desk, doing the specific quiet work of an institution that runs on attention to detail. I was good at it. I am good at detail. The second job came in November of freshman year, when the math of the semester became unavoidable. A 24-hour diner called Patsy's on Green Street, 3 to 4 shifts per week, mostly the late hours that other people didn't want because other people had options about their hours. I took the 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. shift as often as I could get it, because those tips were better, and because the library shifts ended at midnight, and the turnaround gave me just enough time to change and walk the 6 blocks between them. I walked home under orange streetlights at 2 a.m., with tips in my pocket, crumpled 1s and 5s, and the occasional 10 from a table that had ordered more than expected. I would sort them at my desk, put what was needed for groceries and bus fare in one pile, what was needed for the the phone bill in another, and then I would open my laptop and try to focus on whatever was due in the morning. I put back a bag of oranges once. I want to tell you that specifically because it is the detail that lives most clearly in my memory. The specific moment at the Jewel Osco on Neal Street when I put back a bag of oranges because I had calculated my bus fare for the next 3 days, and the oranges were $3.49, and $3.49 was exactly the gap between what I had and what I needed to have. I put them back on the display and walked to the register with what I'd decided I could afford, and I thought, this is what they mean by building character. I was 18. I was in the produce section of a grocery store doing math that came out wrong no matter which way I arranged it. I thought it was the cost of being a first-generation college student managing her own finances. I thought my parents were right, and I was learning something real. I was learning something, just not the lesson they were selling. The laptop incident happened in November of my junior year, and I want to tell you about it because it is the moment where something I had been feeling, not suspecting, just feeling, the ambient discomfort of a daughter who senses that something isn't adding up without knowing what the math is, moved from feeling into evidence. My laptop died on a Wednesday afternoon between a shift at the library and a closing shift at Patsy's. It simply stopped. Screen went black. Power button produced nothing. The machine that contained 4 years of notes and 2 papers in progress became a black rectangle. I called my father. He answered on the third ring with the specific half attention of a man who is multitasking and has decided that the call is probably manageable. I told him what had happened. I told him calmly. I had learned early that calmly was the register that produced the most useful response from my father, that anything that sounded like panic was categorized as drama and handled accordingly. I explained the situation. I said I needed help. He said, "That's really a failure to plan situation, Ruby. I can't bail you out every time something comes up, every time," as though there had been other times, as though I had called him with a pattern of crises that required bailouts. I had not. I had called him twice in 3 years with money problems, and the first time he had said essentially the same thing, and I had handled it alone, and had not called again until I genuinely could not see another option. "Dad," I said, "I have a paper due in 4 days and my laptop is dead." "Computer labs," he said. "That's what they're for." He was not wrong that computer labs existed. He was not right about the rest. I spent 48 hours in the computer lab in the basement of the undergraduate library, sleeping in 2-hour intervals in the chair at my station, eating from vending machines, rewriting from memory, and from the notes I had printed in advance for exactly the reason that I had learned to print things in advance. I submitted the paper with 40 minutes to spare. It got a B+, which I consider one of my more significant academic achievements given the circumstances. That same week, my parents bought an espresso machine. I didn't know that then. I know it now. The house sitting happened in March of senior year. My parents were going to a wine festival in Galena for a long weekend, 4 days, Thursday through Sunday, and they needed someone to water the plants, collect the mail, make sure the house didn't have any issues while they were gone. They asked me because I was close, because I was responsible, and because asking me cost nothing. I said yes. I drove to Naperville on Thursday afternoon and let myself in with the key I'd had since high school. The house was quiet in the way of a house whose regular occupants have left, that specific organized stillness that isn't emptiness but rather the pause of a place that is waiting for the people who belong in it to return. I watered the plants. I collected the mail. I put my bag in my old bedroom, which my mother had converted to a craft room in my sophomore year because I wasn't using it, with a folding cot in the closet for when I visited. On Friday morning, I sat at my father's desk in his home office to use the printer. My phone needed a document printed for a meeting the following week, and the office had the good printer, the one that didn't smear. My father's laptop was open. He had left it logged in. He had, as he always did with his devices at home, saved all his passwords in the browser's password manager because he found it convenient. The banking portal for their joint account was in the browser history, one click from the history menu. I didn't open it immediately. I want to be honest about this. I sat at that desk for approximately 4 minutes with my phone in my hand and the document I needed to print already sent to the queue, looking at the browser history, deciding whether I was going to do what I was considering doing. I had been building a version of my family's finances in my head for years, not consciously, just the ambient accounting that accumulates when you are a person who is good with numbers and who exists in proximity to a financial situation that doesn't quite make sense. The espresso machine, the fact that Ben had a car, the fact that my parents had taken a wine vacation to Galena while I was eating vending machine food in a computer lab. I opened the banking portal. I was in my father's home office from 9:14 a.m. to 11:52 a.m. What I found in those 2 hours and 38 minutes reorganized my understanding of the last 4 years more completely than anything that had come before. The deposits from Eleanor Carter arrived on the 15th of every month. One hour's team $100 every month. $1,500 sent by my grandmother for my education, labeled in the transaction description with a note that said, "For Ruby's college expenses." She had apparently written that note herself at whatever interface she used to make the transfer, with the specific intention of a woman who wanted the money's purpose to be unambiguous. It was unambiguous. It was also redirected within days of every arrival. I built the picture slowly, because slowness was what the situation required, not the slowness of someone who is struggling to understand, but the deliberate pace of someone who knows that what they are seeing is going to need to be documented, and that documentation education requires seeing it completely before you react to any part of it. Month 1, freshman year, $2,500 deposit from Eleanor Carter. 4 days later, a designer handbag from a Nordstrom charge, $387. A steakhouse dinner, $210. 2 days after that, a transfer to Ben's account, $400. Month 3, $1,500 deposit. Days later, spa weekend at a hotel in Wisconsin, $640. Golf supplies, $290. Month 7, the month I couldn't afford the art history textbook and failed the class. The month I called the financial aid office and the library and 2 campus resource centers trying to find a way to cover $220. Deposit from Eleanor Carter, $1,500. 5 days later, concert tickets, $310. Restaurant, $180. Month 14, the month my laptop died. The month I spent 48 hours in a computer lab. Deposit from Eleanor Carter, $2,500. 4 days later, espresso machine, $340. Transfer to Ben's account, $600. I sat in my father's office chair and made a list in the Notes app on my phone. The list had 4 categories. Green, deposits from Grandma Eleanor. Pink, expenditures on luxury items and entertainment. Blue, transfers to Ben. Yellow, household expenses that could plausibly have been covered by my parents' own income, but were, in fact, covered with the month's deposit from Eleanor Carter within the same billing cycle. It took me most of the morning to be sure I was reading it correctly. I am a person who double-checks her math. I checked it 3 times. $72,000. 4 years. $1,400 per month for the months I could access, plus the first year of records that had scrolled past the portal's accessible history, but that I could estimate from the pattern. $72,000 sent by my grandmother to support my education, which had instead supported a spa weekend and a golf subscription, and Ben's Toyota Camry, and an espresso machine purchased in the same week. I spent 2 days in a basement computer lab rewriting a paper from memory. I sat in the chair for a while after I finished the list. My hands were flat on the desk, not shaking. I want to be precise about this because shaking would have been the dramatic response, and what I felt was not dramatic. It was more like the specific stillness that arrives when something enormous lands and your body decides, before your mind has fully processed it, that stillness is the correct response. Then I went to the printer and collected the document I had come for. Then I went to Walgreens and bought a black binder, color-coded tab dividers, and 3 packs of printer paper. Then I came back and printed everything. I want to tell you about the people who helped me over the following 3 weeks, because I did not do what came next alone, and the people who helped me deserve to be named accurately. The first call I made was to Professor Diana Lamb. Diana Lamb has been my academic advisor and, more relevantly, a professor of financial economics at the University of Illinois for 14 years. She is small, precise, and possessed of a specific quality of attention that makes you feel, when she is focused on your problem, that your problem is being seen from every angle simultaneously. I had been in her seminar for 2 semesters and had done well there, and she had written one of my graduate school recommendation letters, and I trusted her in the specific way of someone who has watched a person operate under pressure and found them exactly what they appeared to be. I called her on Saturday morning from my parents' driveway and asked if I could come see her Monday. "Is something wrong?" she said. "I found something," I said, "and I need to understand what I'm looking at before I decide what to do with it." She was quiet for a moment. "Come at 10, she said. "Bring everything." I came at 10 on Monday with the black binder, which now had 4 color-coded sections and a summary page, and I sat across from Professor Lamb in her office and walked her through it the way I had walked through it at the desk in my father's office, slowly, precisely, in chronological order. She asked 3 questions during the entire presentation. She did not offer opinions or interpretations while I was presenting. She waited. When I finished, she looked at the summary page for a long time. "What you've documented here," she said, "is a pattern of financial misconduct involving funds that were specifically designated for your benefit and redirected without your knowledge." She paused. "Has any of this money ever been characterized to you as a family contribution to household expenses? Has your grandmother ever been told the money was going to family expenses rather than specifically to you?" "No," I said. "She called it for Ruby's education every month." "Then the misdirection was deliberate," she said, "not a misunderstanding about how the money was being managed." "Yes," I said. She looked at the binder, then at me. "What are you planning to do with this?" "I'm going to tell my grandmother," I said, "before anything else. She's the one who sent it." "That's the right order," Professor Lamb said. "And then I'm going to let her decide what she wants to do." She nodded slowly. "You may also want to speak to a financial counselor or attorney about your options, in case you want to pursue formal recovery of what should have been yours." I wrote down the name she gave me. Kevin Marsh, certified financial counselor and family estate specialist, 20 years in practice, whom Professor Lamb described as someone who had handled situations involving diverted family funds before, and who was, in her assessment, exactly the kind of person I needed. I called Kevin Marsh that afternoon. He had an opening the following Wednesday. I took it. I went to my grandmother first. Eleanor Carter lives in a house in Oak Park that she and my grandfather bought in 1974, and that my grandfather left to her when he died 11 years ago, and that she has maintained with the specific care of a woman who considers the place where she lives an expression of the life she has built. She gardens, she bakes. Her kitchen table is the place in my family where things that matter have always been discussed, over tea that she makes in a ceramic pot she bought on a trip to England in 1989 wine and that she considers the correct vessel for tea. I arrived on a Tuesday morning. She had tea ready. I sat down and set the binder on the table between us. "Grandma," I said, "I need to show you something." She looked at the binder, then at me. She has the specific perceptive quality of a woman who has been paying attention for 78 years, and she reads rooms the way people read rooms when they have spent decades being the person other people come to when something is wrong. "Show me," she said. I showed her. She didn't speak while I walked her through it. She turned pages. She looked at the green column, her deposits, and the pink column, and the blue column, and the yellow column. She looked at the summary page. She looked at the month I couldn't afford the textbook and failed the class, where her deposit and the concert ticket charge existed in the same billing cycle. One tear landed on the saucer. I did not say anything. She closed the binder. She sat with her hands flat on it for a moment. "What do you want me to do?" she asked. The question was direct and without performance. The question of a woman who has assessed a situation and is offering agency to the person who has been harmed by it. "Keep sending the money," I said, "but change the account." I slid her a napkin. On it, I had written the routing number and account number for a savings account I had opened at a different bank the previous Friday, in my name only, with $47, the amount I had in my pocket the day I'd decided I was done. She looked at the napkin. She picked it up. Her hand didn't shake. "Done," she said. She poured more tea. We sat at her kitchen table for another hour, talking about my graduation and my plans and the graduate school application I was working on. She asked about the program. She asked if I was excited. She was warm in the specific way she had always been warm. Present, interested, without the managed quality of warmth that performs itself for an audience. Before I left, she hugged me at the door the way she always does, with both arms. "I'm sorry," she said. "I should have been talking to you directly. You trusted them," I said. "I should have trusted you more," she said. I drove home and called Kevin Marsh. Kevin Marsh has been a certified financial counselor with a specialty in family estate and trust matters for 21 years. His office is in a building on Washington Street in Chicago that has the functional efficiency of someone who has arranged their professional space around the work rather than the impression of the work. No large glass conference table, no unnecessary square footage, a desk, chairs, a window, and an organization system that suggested everything had a place because everything had been thought about. He reviewed the binder in the 20 minutes before our appointment and met me at the door with the expression of a person who has already formed preliminary conclusions and is ready to discuss them. "What you've documented," he said, "constitutes a diversion of gift funds. Your grandmother designated these funds explicitly for your educational support. The fact that they were routed through your parents' joint account doesn't legally make them your parents' money. The intent and designation are documented in the transaction notes. Is that recoverable?" I asked. "Depends on what you mean by recoverable," he said. "You're not going to take your parents to civil court in most cases like this because the cost and the relationship damage typically exceed the benefit, but there are other forms of accountability." He paused. "The more relevant question, in my experience with these situations, is whether your grandmother has been fully informed and whether she wants to take action regarding her broader estate arrangements." "She knows," I said. "She's already changed the account." He nodded. "Then the question is how far she wants to take it." He gave me two names. The first was his colleague, Teresa Okonkwo, a state attorney, 16 years, who handled situations involving diverted inheritance and gift funds, and who would be able to advise my grandmother on her legal options regarding the people who had misdirected her money. The second was a financial counselor at the university's Student Services Office, who could help me retroactively document my educational expenses and potentially access relief funds I might have qualified for, but hadn't known about. I wrote both names down. I used both of them. 2 weeks after my visit to my grandmother's kitchen table, my parents threw me a graduation party. I want to say that again because I want you to understand the specific texture of the situation. 2 weeks after my grandmother changed the account, after she had turned every page of the black binder and watched the evidence of 4 years' land in the right place, my parents organized a party at the Naperville Country Club for 30 guests, with a catered buffet and a bar and a decorative graduation cap on the dessert table. They invited my grandmother. I think about this. I have thought about it many times in the months since, and I cannot decide whether they were confident that she hadn't told them about our Tuesday, or whether they had spoken to her and she had given nothing away, or whether they had simply decided that the best way to manage what might be coming was to be preemptively public about their pride in me. My father gave a speech. He stood at the front of the private dining room with a champagne flute and 30 guests and the specific confidence of a man who has spent years being the authority in his own household and who considers himself genuinely a good father. He talked about hard work. He talked about perseverance. He talked about what it meant to raise a self-sufficient daughter, about the value of doing things on your own, about the character that struggle builds. He accepted the applause like he had written my thesis. I stood near the back of the room, beside my brother Ben, who was looking at my father with the slightly glazed expression of someone who has not yet connected the threads of what is about to happen. Then my grandmother stood up. She is not a theatrical person. She does not make speeches for the performance of them. When Eleanor Carter speaks in a room, it's because she has something to say and has decided to say it, and the saying of it doesn't require staging or announcement. She simply stood, and the room went quiet in the way rooms go quiet when the oldest person in them decides to speak. "I'd like to say something," she said. Her voice was warm. The room was warm. 30 people held their champagne glasses and smiled smiled at my grandmother, who was going to say something sweet about her granddaughter's graduation. I'm so proud of Ruby. She has worked so hard, and that has always been clear to me. She smiled at me across the room. That's why I was happy to help. I'm glad the $1,500 I've been sending every month helped you get through it, dear. She said it the same way she had said it at the restaurant, warmly, without ceremony, like sharing something sweet. This time, I was ready. The room shifted, not dramatically, more like the specific physical change that a room makes when its emotional weather changes and everyone feels it before they know why. My Aunt Carol across the room stopped mid-sip. My cousin Devin, who I liked and who had always been kind to me, looked from my grandmother to me and then to my parents in the specific sequence of someone doing rapid contextual math. My father was already composing his face into the expression he uses when a situation requires management. I looked at my grandmother. I never got it, Grandma, I said. Gasps. They started at the table nearest my grandmother and moved outward the way sound moves in a room. Not all at once, but in a wave, as each person processed what they'd heard and passed the information to the next awareness. My Aunt Carol's mouth opened, stayed open. My father stepped forward. The expression that arrived on his face was the one I had been watching him use my entire life. The expression of a man who is about to reframe a situation as a misunderstanding and is confident he can do it. Ruby, his voice was modulated, even, the voice he uses in difficult conversations where he needs to be the adult. We talked about this. It was a misunderstanding with the accounts. The money went to household expenses that supported your— I reached into my bag. I set the black binder on the nearest table. Not dramatically, the way you set down a document that needs to be seen. The room watched me open it. Green, I said, is Grandma's deposits. $54,000 in the records I could access. $72,000 total estimated from the pattern. I turned to the next tab. Pink is spa weekends, designer clothes, restaurant charges, golf supplies. Another tab. Blue is money sent to Ben. I looked at my brother. Your car deposit. Your apartment deposit. Your ski trip. Ben had gone the color of old paper. He was looking at the blue highlighted pages with the expression of someone who is receiving information that reorganizes the last 4 years of his understanding of his own life. My car, he said quietly. Not to me, to himself, or to the room, or to nobody in particular. My apartment deposit. My mother couldn't look at him. She was staring at the table. I had watched my mother manage difficult situations my entire life. The specific composure of a woman who has decided, consistently and across many years, that the way through an uncomfortable thing is to appear above it. She could not find that composure. The binder was on the table in front of 30 people, and there was no appearing above a binder. My father said, "This is a private family matter, and I think we should—" You gave a speech, I said, in front of 30 people, about the value of self-sufficiency and what you taught me about hard work. This seems like the right room. He stopped. My grandmother had been watching the room with the expression of a woman who has already done her accounting and is now watching other people do theirs. She reached into her bag, her phone. My father's eyes went wide in the specific way of someone who has identified a variable they cannot control. Eleanor, he said. She dialed. The room was completely quiet, the kind of quiet where 30 people are collectively holding breath they didn't decide to hold. It rang twice. David, she said when her attorney answered. David Horton, a state attorney. I had looked him up because my grandmother had mentioned his name once, and I am a person who looks things up. 33 years in estate and trust law, the firm on Ontario Street that my grandmother had used for a decade. Close the joint account with my daughter. Begin reviewing every asset I've co-signed for Mark and Sarah. I'd like to see the full list of what I've authorized them to access, and then I'd like to start the process of removing them as beneficiaries from my will. The gasp that moved through the room was the kind that only happens when 30 people process the same information simultaneously and find it equally large, a collective intake of 30 separate breaths. Understood, David Horton said. His voice was audible in the silence of that room, the specific voice of a man who has been an attorney for 33 years and has learned that his job in moments like this one is to be unflappable. Consider it done. My grandmother put her phone in her bag. She looked at my father for one moment, not with anger, with the specific expression of a woman who has made a decision and is looking at the thing that caused her to make it. Then she looked at me. I picked up my bag. I walked across the private dining room of the Naperville Country Club, past my cousin Devin, who reached out and briefly touched my arm as I passed, past my Aunt Carol, who was still sitting with her mouth slightly open, past 30 people who were very still and very quiet, and I walked out the door into the parking lot where the May afternoon was bright and specific, and entirely outside the walls of that room. I didn't look back. There was nothing in that room that required a look back. The truth was already standing where everyone could see it, color-coded, time-stamped, printed in 3 copies, and impossible to explain with the word misunderstanding.